Welcome back to the Kangaroo Corner Sports Podcast. I'm the Kangaroo in question, Joey Johnson. If you know anything about me, you'll know that I'm a big fan of combat sports, and we had an interesting weekend with a few different events this past weekend. So I'm going to get into that a little bit, but before I do that, I do want to tell you a little bit about me as a fan, how I became a fan of combat sports. Boxing, I can't really give you a definitive answer. I know that I've been watching boxing for as long as I can remember, really. My older brother is a fan, my mom is a fan, and so I've just kind of been surrounded by boxing fans, and I got into boxing at a pretty early age. When it comes to MMA, I can definitely tell you that it happened around 2002, 2003-ish at the University of North Texas. Some of the friends I made there were MMA fans when I met them. They started getting me into it, introducing me to the sport. And I became a fan pretty quickly. Once I got into the sport, I wanted to learn more about it, but that wasn't really easy to do back then. But they found a jiu-jitsu studio that they started going to. I couldn't go because of schedule conflicts, but we were also members of the wrestling club on campus at the time. So they'd go to jiu-jitsu class, learn whatever they learned, and then we'd all show up to wrestling club early where they teach me what they learned. So I'm not an expert by any means, but I have spent some time on the mat. Kind of the same thing with boxing and kickboxing. I'm not an expert at all, but I have done it. My brother has trained at Guy Mesger's gym in Dallas for several years, more than 10, probably close to 15 at this point. If you're not familiar with Guy Mesger, he was in the early UFCs, around UFC 14, I think, was his debut. I could be wrong. That's just off the top of my head. But somewhere in those early days of UFC, he has a gym in Dallas, like I said. He was also a world kickboxing champion and a world full contact karate champion. So he is excellent. My brother's been training there for years, and I go occasionally when I'm in Dallas to visit him. So, like I said, by no means an expert, but I have a little bit of experience. I'm not just talking about it. I have gotten in the gym. I have worked out. I have sparred. I have rolled, all that stuff. Anyway, to start off with the boxing, which everybody has been talking about, it has been a very interesting story. Before I get into the main event, I do have to say that Serrano and Taylor, the women's fight on that card, was the fight of the night for sure. Maybe the fight of the year as far as the fights that I've seen. I've missed a few big time fights, but that was a great fight. This is the second time they put on a great fight, and it was good by any standard you want to judge it by. You know, you see a fight like that and you see a lot of people talking about it was a great women's fight. And no, it was a great fight, period. No qualifiers are needed to describe that fight. It was a great fight, period. One of the best I've seen in a while. It's the second time they put on a great fight like that. Hopefully there will be a third one. I was not a fan of the decision at all. I thought Serrano won the fight, period. But when you add in that Taylor had a point deducted for constantly ducking your head and throwing headbutts, which she's been accused of several times by several people, the ref did not do a whole lot to stop it. He didn't warn her for it near as much. There were way more headbutts that I saw than there were warnings for headbutts, in my opinion. So I would love to see that fight a third time. It's been magic the two times they fought. I have no doubt that it will be magic for a third time, maybe with a ref that is going to get in there and warn her about the headbutts a little bit sooner and not let it go on as long as it did, not let as many go away unadmonished. The main event was exactly what I was expecting, exactly what a lot of people were expecting. And the people that are saying that it was a fix, talking about the script, talking about it was a plan, I think you just set yourself up for disappointment. There was no reason in the world to think that a 58-year-old man was going to be able to be close to his prime to begin with. But even if he could be prime Mike Tyson, how long did you expect a 58-year-old man to be able to be at his best? Fighting a 20-something-year-old. It just wasn't realistic. It wasn't feasible. You get out there, you get in front of those lights. It always is going to have an effect on everybody. Your heart's going to start beating a little bit faster. And when your heart starts beating faster and you get that adrenaline rush when you're walking to the ring, that's a little bit less energy that you have when the fight actually starts. But it's exactly tactically what most boxing people thought it would be. is going to be Jake Paul running from Mike Tyson trying to get close. If he does manage to get close, Jake Paul is going to clinch him. And once the almost 60-year-old man gets tired, then Jake Paul will start throwing punches. And I expected him to be as miserable a person as I always assumed that he is from his interviews, and go out and go after Tyson's head once Tyson got tired. He didn't do that. He played a very gentle game with Tyson. If that's a safe way to say it, it's probably not. But he didn't go out there and try to take an almost 60-year-old man's head off once he clearly had the advantage. And I do have to give him credit for that, because he didn't have to do that. But that doesn't mean that it was a setup or that it was fixed. It was just an old man trying to fight a much younger man, and the old man got tired. And the young man didn't want to have a death on his hands, potentially. So that's really all there is to say about that fight. In my opinion, it was okay. It was a great event. It was a great spectacle. But anybody expecting the boxing to be good, fool themselves. Anybody expecting Mike Tyson to be able to be Mike Tyson, fool themselves. That's just what it is. Now, I will get into the business aspect of it, because for me, that was more interesting than the fight itself. The general consensus in sports circles and in media circles is that Netflix is going to make a major big money bid to get NFL Sunday Ticket once that current contract expires. If that's their goal, and that's why they had this fight, and that's why they're bringing in WWE Monday Night Raw starting in January, that's the reason why they have a few Christmas Day NFL games. If their goal is to get NFL Sunday Ticket, then this event, no matter how much money they actually made off of it, is a disaster. There is no other way to put it, because you just showed that you can't stream when big numbers of people are watching. And yes, they have those NFL games in December on Christmas Day. Yes, they have WWE that are going to be live on Monday night starting in January. So they have time to fix things, and they have time to try to prove that they can do better. But at this point, they look terrible. They look like they can't handle massive numbers of people streaming. And if you're going to try to do NFL Sunday Ticket, and you have 2 or 3 important games all going on at the same time, and those games start crashing and freezing and buffering and kicking people back to the beginning of the game, everything that people are complaining happened to them on Netflix during the fight, then you are going to have a massive disaster and a massive backlash that I don't think Netflix can afford to handle at this point. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how their upcoming live streams do, if they get their stuff together and do better. But right now, if I was the NFL, they would be so far down on the list of potential suitors for Sunday Ticket, it wouldn't even be worth talking about them at this moment until they prove that they can do live stuff better. We transition to the UFC pay-per-view. There was a lot on that card. I'm not going to get into much of it. The biggest interest in that card for me was obviously Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. There were other good fights. There were other good fighters. But the main event was what that card was about, in my opinion. And it was not as bad as Tyson and Paul, because Stipe was fighting back. But it was as lopsided, almost as lopsided, because you had Stipe, who is past his prime, against Jones, who is slightly past his prime. Jones is 4 or 5 years younger than Stipe. Jones is in his late 30s. Stipe is creeping up on his mid-40s. And once they got in there, Stipe, after a 4-year layoff at that age too, just looked incredibly slow. And Jones just kind of did whatever he wanted to in that fight. It was not really a fun fight to watch as far as a competitive fight. It was fun to watch just how creative and dominant Jones can be, but if you want two guys to go out there and just go back and forth, it was not fun in that aspect. That spinning body kick that ended the fight was crazy. I thought as soon as it landed and Stipe crumbled the way he did, Herb Dean should have stepped in and stopped the fight right there, because he looked done at that point. He looked done before that, but that was just brutal. Jones didn't really land anything big on the ground, but he did have a chance to throw a few punches while Stipe was on the ground, and obviously not able to fight back the way that kick landed and the way he fell. So the big question now is what happens next with Jones? He said that he wants a fight with Alex Pereira. He said he'll vacate the championship in order to do that because that's the fight that he wants. He wants the legacy fight. He wants the big money fight. And it's not exactly really set in stone. Dana White has said that that's not an option, that Jones, if he fights again, because there was talk of him retiring, but if he fights again, that Dana White has said that he has to fight Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is the interim heavyweight champion. He's a good fighter, very good fighter. He doesn't have exactly the strength of resume, but very few people in the heavyweight division can, because it's always been a top-heavy division in MMA. There's only so many people that size that want to fight. There's only that many people that size in the world, period. And it's not a stacked division. It never has been. You have 2 or 3 guys at the top typically, and then everybody else. And there's typically a clear difference between those levels. So Aspinall looks to be very talented, very physically imposing, impressive, but he doesn't have the resume. And a lot of people are criticizing Jones for not wanting to fight Aspinall and wanting the bigger name instead of the unification fight with the interim champion. But I think that might be what the UFC ends up deciding too. And Dana White has said what he said, and he might mean it, and they might stick with it. But it's not the first time that the UFC has said something and then changed their minds on it. And if the big money is Jones and Alex Pereira, which I think it is, then that is the fight that we will see. Aspinall deserves a fight. He's the interim champion. Jones is the heavyweight champion. Those 2 fighters fighting and unifying is the best move from a sporting perspective. But when it comes to what the UFC and all of these companies have in common, is that the sporting is an aspect of the sport. It's not the entire thing. The money, the entertainment value is also up there, and probably more important than just the pure sporting aspect. And if that's the case, then the fight to make is clearly Jon Jones and Alex Pereira. Not just because of Pereira's track record and he just has that ridiculous power that it looks like he can knock anybody out at any time. But the fact is, people who aren't big-time fans of the sport, people who are casual fans, people that pop in and out, watch when there's somebody having a gathering, getting people together to watch fights, or just big names and I'm going to watch, but other than that, I don't care. People know Alex Pereira's name way more than they know Tom Aspinall's. He has a better track record, and he is the biggest money fight that the UFC can make right now is Jones and Pereira. So do they want to do what's right for the sport or what's right for their wallet? And that's always a coin toss. So we'll see what happens with that. I will talk about that a little bit more soon. I will definitely do a lot of talking about the differences between what's good for the sport and what's good for the money. And tomorrow I will be back. Just a little bit of football talk, not going in depth into anything at this point. Just the teams that have interested me the most this season and what I would be happy and nervous about if I was a fan of those teams. So that's coming for you tomorrow. If you are joining me for the second time, thank you. If you're joining me for the first time, welcome. I hope to see you soon. Like, rate, share, subscribe, all those things that podcasts tell you to do at the end, because I need some viewers, y'all. I ain't going to lie to you. So thank you for joining me on the Kangaroo Corner. I am the kangaroo in question, Joey Johnson, and I will see you soon.